standing next to my 17-year-old sister Talia on the beach at an all-inclusive resort in Mexico, watching my dad run off with a beautiful woman. Her name's Anita. She's tall, blonde, and beautiful. You know, kind of like one of those moms you always hope you'll look like when you're older. She's the mom of one of the girls on my soccer team who coincidentally happens to be staying at the same resort as us. I had never thought much about my dad and Anita's relationship until my sister Talia plants the idea in my head. Doesn't it bug you how much time Dad and Anita have been spending together? I can't believe he would do that. It suddenly dawned on me that my father had never really spent this much time with a new woman before. I could tell Talia was really upset, and she had good reason to be. 4 years ago, my mom and dad sat my siblings and I down, and they told us they had a surprise to tell us. I thought that for sure I was getting the dog I had always wanted, or we were going to Disneyland. But unfortunately, their choice of wording was not exactly thought out. They continued to tell us that this surprise was that my mother Lynn had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. At that moment, my entire life changed. No longer did I live in this 9-year-old world where life was filled with rainbows and butterflies, but my mom was sick. And luckily, my mom's cancer was found at an early stage, and after going through chemotherapy and having surgery and radiation, she fully recovered. And 3 years later, the 5 of us went out to celebrate the news that my mom's cancer was supposedly gone for good. Unfortunately, though, life doesn't always pan out the way we hope, and a few months later, my mom was re-diagnosed. And after stepping back into battle with this horrible disease, my mother, Lynn, passed away. I was 13 years old and had lost the most important person in my entire life. My mother, Lynn, was the most beautiful woman inside and out. She was always optimistic, and she genuinely cared about each and every single person she met. She taught me to accept everyone for who they are, and to always live life with the glass half full. I remember before she passed away, she told me that every night before I went to bed, she wanted me to go through that day and think about all the blessings that I had, even on days filled with turmoil and sadness, because if I dug deep enough, I'd be able to find them. My mom taught me that life is short and that there's no time to waste. She had this incredible smile and presence and made an impact on each and every person she met. She was the person that held our family as a unit. And when she passed away, there was this void that could never be filled. All I can think about is how lucky I was to have spent 13 years of my life with her. So here I am in Mexico 9 months later, and instead of enjoying walking along the beach and drinking illegally, I'm watching my sisters stare at my dad and Anita, shooting them dirty looks left, right, and center. It started becoming more and more difficult watching my dad with a woman who wasn't my mom. And the fact that every time we went for dinner, the waiters thought we were a family didn't help much. I was getting ready for our final meal at this fancy restaurant, excited to spend quality time with the 4 of us. We sat down, and we didn't even finish reading the drinks menu when my dad set my sister off for good. He starts telling us, oblivious to our sensitivity, the funniest thing that happened this morning. Him and Anita pretended to be a married couple in order to get free breakfast at the information meeting. Well, my sister did not think this was very funny, and before he even finished explaining to us, she stood up and threw her napkin on the table, and through watering eyes, she ran out of the restaurant, telling us not to follow her. My dad, wide-eyed and confused, looked at my brother and I for guidance, and my brother rolled his eyes at my sister's obvious dramatic exit. And I, knowing that when my sister Talia says not to follow her, she really means, I want you to follow me, take my cue and run after her. Ever since my mother Lynn passed away, I've tried to take on the role of comforting my sister Talia. My mom had this amazing gift where she knew exactly how to handle each and every person in our family whenever we were upset. I run after Talia and I find her on the beach, waves crashing in the moonlight. And at the moment, there's no words to describe how we're feeling. We hug in silence for a while, missing our mom. And I started to tell Tal that even though it's sooner than we expected, we knew that eventually Dad was going to date other women. The most important thing to our mom was that we were all going to be happy, and she would never want Dad to be alone. I told her that no matter how hard it was watching him with Anita, we should suck it up and just deal with it. I realize when I'm saying all these things to comfort my sister Talia, that I'm also saying all these things to comfort myself. For a while, we walk along the beach in silence, wind blowing. And finally, I suggest that we head back to the hotel room so that my dad doesn't worry. I open the door to the hotel room, and my dad and brother are sitting on the bed awaiting our arrival. There's something important I have to tell you, girls. My stomach went up to my throat and my mind started to race. My dad is getting married to Anita. It's been 9 months since my mother passed away, and I'm gonna have a stepmother and 2 evil stepsisters and have to spend the rest of my life sharing a bathroom with all these girls. This can't be happening. I look at my brother to give me a hint as to what's going on, but he gives me nothing. I think you girls should sit down, my dad says. I sit down, ready to find out that my life is completely over, when my dad looks at us and he says, girls, before I married your mother, I used to date men. My mind went blank. I stare at my father, who I thought I once knew, and I suddenly have no clue who he really is. I feel like I'm in one of those movies where they tell you something and then your life goes on pause, but everything's going around in slow motion. Finally, somebody breaks the unbearable silence. My brother Jacob opens his mouth. I'm gay too. Real shocker. Ever since my brother was 9 years old, he's had a gift and passion for hairdressing. And he sometimes liked to wear dresses. And although he never admitting to being gay, it had always sort of been in the back of our minds. And so compared to this bomb that my dad just dropped on me, I wasn't really surprised. My brother continues to tell us that before my mom passed away, she had sat him down and told him that no matter what he chose to do in the future, no matter what his sexual orientation was, that she would support him and love him no matter what. She told him, you know, Jacob, it's normal to be gay. I mean, your dad used to date men. My mom knew all along. I look at my dad, still unable to speak, in total shock. And he begins to tell us that before he married my mom, he told her about his past with men, but that it didn't matter because there was no one else he'd rather spend the rest of his life with. My mother must have had no doubt about it because for the next 20 years they were madly in love and happily married up until the day she died. I'm more than overwhelmed by all this information being thrown at me. How is my nerdy, unstylish Jewish dad gay? I excuse myself onto the balcony looking over the very fitting, everlasting ocean, close the door behind me so that I can be alone, and plug in my headphones and choose the most appropriate song I can think of for the moment. Because you had a bad day, you're taking one down, you serious I wasn't crying because I was so upset that my dad was gay. I was crying because of the reason I had been crying for the past year, because I missed my mom. And not only do I always cry about my mom when I'm upset about anything, but whenever there's a big milestone in my life, all I want is for her to be there to talk to. And this is one of those moments. And all I can think about is that if she had never gotten sick and never passed away, then this would be happening to me and my life would be somewhat normal. Well, apparently the doors to the balcony were pretty thin, because when I walked back inside after a couple of hours, my dad was a bit nervous. I had to explain to him that the reason behind my tears had nothing to do with him and that I was just missing Mom. He told my siblings and I that he wouldn't come out to anyone until we were comfortable with it and when we were, and that no matter what, we were his first priority. 2 months later, my dad came out to all of our family and friends, and they all went through the initial shock that we all did. My brother came out alongside him, and I can confidently say had the easiest coming out in the history of And here we are, 5 years later, and my brother and dad being gay is such a normal part of my life. Who would have thought that just 2 weekends ago, we'd be in San Francisco gay clubbing in the Castro district with all 4 members of my family. A regular weekend in the life of the Rozenberg fam. And I guess it took some getting used to when we went out for dinner and we all would check out the waiter. It took a lot of getting used to. Although at times, I've been confused about my dad's new lifestyle and my parents' relationship, what I have come to terms with is that there are no guidelines when it comes to who we can love. We're all just people. I like to believe that my mother, Lynn, is still here watching over us and would be overjoyed that we are all living life to its fullest. I guess I believe that my dad coming out has been a blessing in a way, because no matter who he meets, no one will ever be able to replace my amazing mother.